is like bank, financial institutions, retail businesses, wealth management investment banking. All these are businesses, and they need a vendors to support their the business process, like for the mutual fund order placement, calculations of the order, or for the anti-money laundering transaction monitoring system, or the customer scoring system. Systems they take support from the vendors. Vendor is expert in the IT projects. So they are providing service to the multiple banks. So they have the ready solutions. So that will the bank be able to build that product with minimum cost and optimum way. So that's the process. So what is the role of business analyst in the vendor evaluation for the transaction monitoring system? So that system is used by the banks or the financial institutions manage their all kinds of transactions monitoring. So I will guide you all these things in detail for these presentations. Please stay tuned with guys with me. So let's move on the next slide. So why the large bank need a new transaction monitoring system? Why they want the transaction monitoring system? So first of all, understand what is a transaction monitoring system. So transaction monitoring system is a system that will identify, that will help bank identify the fraudulent transactions, or is there someone doing the anti-money laundering or the counter-terrorism financing using that bank. So that the software which will that provide the solution or analyze the financial transactions in real time or near real time to detect the suspicious activity, that will manage the case management, that will create the suspicious activity reports, or the suspicious transactions report, or the cash transactions report, and that will help bank do the faster and appropriate way with the help of the AI or the risk-based methods to monitor the transactions. So that's why the bank need the transaction monitoring system to prevent the anti-money laundering and the counter-terrorist financing. So it's an important for the regular compliance, risk mitigation, and increase the operation efficiency. So bank must comply with anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing regulations, and bank will follow the regulations which defined by the financial intelligence units for that country. Okay, so, and it will help bank to identify and prevent the financial crime and protecting the bank reputation and financial stability. So there is a different kind of customers, and they have their high risk customer, low risk customer, medium risk customers, and they have some rules and regulations and the business logics uh, defined by the regulation for the business financial intelligence units of that country, and it will help the bank to improve the operational efficiency, and automate and detects of anomalies, reduce the manual effort and false positive. So that kind of the financial system, we will help bank to find the appropriate vendor to support the pain points, and do the faster way to monitor the transactions, and daily billions and trillions of transactions happening in each banks, and they have the the newly updated or newly technology oriented systems or the transaction monitoring vendor to do their the logics. Okay, and the goal of this project is to select and implement the best fit transaction monitoring from the list of vendors. If you go, there are the different n number of vendor, but we need to identify the vendor which will exactly matches with the requirement of the bank and the challenges which faced by the bank, and which will the exactly matches with the financial intelligence requirement or the compliance requirement, and that will help to you train the bank employees. So that's the thing. Let's move on the business analyst core goal for vendor evaluation project. So the BA will bringing the gap between the business and the technology team. So business analyst, the center of the knowledge, he should have the idea in the functional and technical sides. So BA has a critical link between the business stakeholder like compliance, operation, risks, IT, data, and the technology teams like IT, security, and they gather the requirement from both the teams, like create the current state assessment document, future state assessment document, business requirement document, and conduct the workshop, chat session, team meetings with the different teams like compliance team, operation team, risk team, or the IT team, security team, operational teams, business team, and gather the requirement with using the workshop and the document that requirement. The key and core responsibility of business analyst in such kind of project to vendor evaluation to translate the bank complex business need, regulatory requirement, and technical constraint into the clear set of requirement that can use and evaluate the select right vendor for the bank, and that will help bank that will be the to identify the pain points in their current system and give the appropriate solutions to this bank. So it focus on ensuring the final solution not only meets the technical specification but also solve the bank core business problems. It's I rightly said it. And that will be the solution will be the AI driven, and that will be future predictions. The count increase the count of the transactions day by day on the online transactions. To in India we are implementing the UPI systems, and everyone goes on the UPI system and increase the transactions. So that way and the core banking system and the transaction monitoring system or the case management system should be linked with the new technology where like API or the Excel. So has bank ones, and most of the processes should be the using the processes with using the robotic automation process or the detect the customer behavior to identify the suspicious transactions, to do the preparation of the suspicious activity report or the suspicious case report with the minimum manual intervention of the human, and the system will automatically do such kind of things. So vendor need the such kind of the project, so help the business analyst will evaluate the vendors for the businesses like banks. Then it will be the phase by phase process. So first phase is the planning and discovery. Second phase is the vendor evaluation. Third phase is the selection and implementation. So these are the three phase things. So you should understand each phase. So first one is the planning and discovery. So where in the planning and discovery we need a laying on the foundation for the successful of the projects. So we should understand, we should prepare the baseline document has is a document, and the future or the to be document we need to do the gap analysis. So where we do the requirement gathering. So in the requirement gathering the business analyst will conduct the workshops with the different kind of stakeholder, like interview with the stakeholder or the brainstorming session with the stakeholder, or the to do the meetings with the stakeholder and identify all kind of functional, non-functional, technical requirement, or do the what are the with using the Moscow technique to prioritize the requirement. What are the requirement that should be in the system, or what are the requirement that if that is in the systems, so that is the good that is good for the system to collect these kind of requirements from all the stakeholder, and to do the functional related thing, what features are needed in the system, like a scenario detections, case management, reporting, or to identify the behavior of customer, to 360-degree profiling of the customers, to identify the customer transactions and detect their anomalies in the transactions, to reduce the false positive rates. So all these things should have in the systems, and that kind of related requirements, or to draw the process flow diagram, swim lane diagram, or the transactions diagram, or to the current state or the future state. And then the non-functional requirement, how it should perform, how the system will perform, what are the technical things that system should have, scalability, security, and performance of the system. So that all these things should have the system, and that should contain, that should really requirement gather by the business analyst in the requirement gathering sessions. Okay, and then prepare the current state analysis or the current state document, and document all these things with the Word document or the PPT documents in existing process system, pain points to establish and baseline to implement what that business, that bank should implement their system, so that will be increase the efficiency of the transaction monitoring system, and that kind of requirements should gather and understand the hazards process or the current state analysis done by the business analyst, and then define the scope definition. What are the scope? what are the in-scope functionality and what are the out-scope functionality that should have in the transaction monitoring system, and clear boundaries of the project and prevent the scope creep, and ensure all stakeholders are aligned with that project. And then the documentation, create a key artifact like a business requirement document or the request for a proposal document to, and the stakeholder analysis like RACI matrix or the stakeholder importance matrix to prepare this thing, is and the important role of business analyst in the planning and discovery phase. So everyone should have on the same page. So let's move on the next page of the business analysis. So the vendor evaluation. It's a very critical and very important page for the business analyst. The core BA contribution for these at the page two, which is a vendor evaluation, is a developing for the request for proposal document, creating the evaluation criteria for the vendor, and managing the vendor demos. To ask the questions to the vendor, understand their the key functionality or the how the software which is provided by the vendor should work. Okay, and analysis and reporting to the bank, and help bank to identify, create the vendor matrix, so that will help the bank to identify the appropriate vendor. So developing the request for proposal document, it's the key uh, the thing which done by the business analyst to prepare the request for proposal document and draft the detailed document outlining the bank's requirement which vendor will use to prepare their the solution. And then the creating the evaluation criteria for the vendor, work with the stakeholder to define the scoring rubric, and which will include the functional fee, technical fee, vendor profile, and the cost of ownership. So that is also most important, and the feasibility study done by the business analyst in that stage. So in the financial fit, does it vendor solution meets all the requirements which are we are into proposed solution, or the business requirement document we are added, what are the high priority requirement, what are the that should be must requirement should be in the system, or what are the requirement if that in the system that will be well and good. So do the financial fit for that. And the technical capabilities, do the technical capability, what are the techniques, what are the programming language, what are the volume, what are the technical things required for that vendor to perform there, and how much the duration should require that vendor to implement their system in the bank. So it is and the scalability secure and compatible with the bank existing systems. How the vendor system should be compatible with the bank, and how they are doing their transactions, and and track the transaction monitoring system. So that will be the technical compliances. And the vendor profiling, what is the vendor reputation, support model, and financial test stability, who are the clients of the vendor, what are their clients feedback. So all these things are done by the vendor profiling, with the PA will be important role in vendor support model and the financial stability. And then the total cost or and the ownership, the total cost, ownership, the licensing fees, implementation cost, and ongoing support. So that should be on by the business analyst, and that should be defined by the business analyst. Then the managing vendor demos, continuously with vendor their demo their the product or the functions. So attend that demos, ask the question to the vendor, and gather the requirement and understand the product of the vendor, and identify is that vendor product is sufficient for the banking system, banking transaction monitoring system with the budget required for that vendor. So implement the cost, ongoing support. Okay, and targeted and clarifying the question, and analyzing the reports, objective scoring vendor response, and presenting and creating the summary report for that vendor, and highlight the strengths and weaknesses of each candidate and each vendor. So do the analysis and reporting of the vendor and send these to the bank. So bank will be find the appropriate vendor for their the transaction monitoring system. And last stage is the selection and implementation. So from vendor to partner, so banks is their vendor to partner, select the selection, support, present and analyze the steering committee, and provide a data driven recommendation for the preferred vendors, identify the data to identify the previous customer or transaction report or the success rate of that customer, and data driven things done by the business analyst to help the business team or to help the project sponsor or the project team to identify the appropriate project to support their projects and to increase the transaction monitoring system within a time, within a budget, or that will be the future able to do the transaction monitoring with the future volume of the transaction, because of continuously increase the number of transactions day by day, adding more the customer with the online transactions. So the system will need to track all these transactions and detailed requirement for implementation. Once a vendor is chosen, refine the high level requirement into detail specific for the implementation team, and it will done by the business analyst. And then the change management is the also most important concept for the transaction monitoring system, that is a change management. Work with the business user to prepare for the new system which is involved in the process for the training, and to identify the how the training or the process will happen for the new system. So that's the change management. And the EVT acceptance testing or the testing planning for each step by step to define the selection and implementation, how done by the vendor to gather the requirement from the business, to do the requirement analysis, to design the documents, to do the development on that product or the functions, and then implement and do the EVT, and the final the production deployment, how that phases and how much the time required to complete each phases, and what are the SDLC methodology like waterfall, agile, scrum, kanban, spiral, which is used by the vendor to deploy that product or the functions in the bank or the financial institution. So help define the test cases and scenarios to ensure the implementation systems work as per the expectation of the business or the banks. And essential skill for the business analyst in a such kind of product, like beyond the job description, that skill should business analyst have the strong analytical skills, the ability to break down complex problem and data from vendor into dealing is the insights, collect the data from insights and create the insight that will help business to identify the appropriate solutions. And the BA should have the 360-degree thinking ability and the domain expertise. So business analysts should understand the AML, anti-money laundering and counter-terrorist financing, CTF businesses in very well, and KYC and AML, so understand the banking operations, compliance, regulations, and major advantage. Understand the rules and regulation defined by the financial intelligence of that country. So that's the very important. India financial intelligence of India, financial intelligence of Sri Lanka in Sri Lanka. So that should be understanding and understand each requirement for the business analyst, and excellent in communication, the ability to communicate effectively with diverse stakeholder and the C-level executive and technical developer. So be for these project business analysts, the chief executive officers of that businesses to communicate with them and put and gather the requirement from them. So the excellent communication skill or ability the business analyst should have in such kind of the projects, and it's so very huge project for the bank, and the negotiation and inflation skills. So the skill to manage the expectation and find the common ground among the competitive business properties, and to identify the appropriate negotiation skills that should have the business analyst, and attention to details, that is the most important things to understand, to gather the requirement, collect the detailed requirement, and act as to new the each the system or the each the requirement of the businesses are new, and to understand, gather the requirement in detail, and then document this requirement, and meticulous documentation and analysis are crucial to successful vendor selection for the businesses or for the banks. And the be a value to such kind of projects. So vendor selection projects, why the BA is dispensable for such kind of projects. So business analyst is a project advocate for the businesses to gather the requirement, to prepare the flow chart, simulate diagram, or the UML diagrams for the projects, and that will help the businesses or the vendor to understand the process, the to be process and the current process, and then they will make their demos or They will approach for a response to the request for proposal document, and they ensure that the chosen solution truly solve the bank's problem and not just the technical challenges or the functional challenges that will help bank to grow and increase their the transaction monitoring system, and bank that the system will help to identify the fraudulent transaction in their system and prevent the fraudulent transaction by using the banking system. And there is a work minimization ring, reduce risks, reduce the cost, and maximize the return and investment of the new transaction monitoring system, which is done by the banks. a, a strong BA guarantee that the project align with the bank's strategic goal and regulatory obligations. So the business analyst should understand such kind of projects in very well. So thank you guys for attending my sessions. If you like, please like and subscribe my channel. That will motivate me to create more videos for you. Thank you. Thanks for everyone.